Our efforts to keep the peace often are short term because of our own lack of internal peace when we do that. But when we do that with our business, we do things just to keep the peace, it ends up really negatively impacting our business. And like I said, we come by this honestly. We were so often corrected and criticized, and many of us just tried to make ourselves small and out of the way and like follow the rules and try and keep it together as much as we could. Some of us were able to do that, some not, just depending on what was going on in your life. Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about an important topic that impacts not just your business, but your life. So, if you're an ADHD woman who's having a hard time being taken seriously or having your business take off or even catch yourself having great ideas and you can't bring them to fruition, then this podcast is for you. All right, ladies, today we're going to talk about playing small and some of what might be going on behind that. What I want to share is I've noticed I was going to say in working with ADHD women, but really since I started in the mental health field in the year 2000, so oh my gosh, almost 24 years ago now, I've noticed that women have a very, very hard time putting themselves first. And hey, I have been in that too at different times in my life, right? And sometimes can still bump into it. It's a very ingrained pattern, but having a hard time putting themselves first. And since working with entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs with ADHD, I've noticed these women having a very hard time investing in themselves and investing in their business, which is a problem because if you're trying to create a business so that you can, replace full-time income so you don't have to have a job anymore and you can just enjoy your business, or maybe you already have your business, but you're just trying to really get it going, this can be a real problem because in order to run a successful business, you've got to invest the time, energy, and often monetary and other resources to be able to do it well so that it keeps working in the long run. So you might be wondering, what does this look like, right? So kind of like I said at the beginning, this can look like having like all these brilliant ideas or even like cool ideas. Like they don't have to be brilliant or amazing, but just even having some ideas, you're like, yeah, I'd love to do that. But not being able to bring them to fruition. And sure, I want to say like, okay, yes, if you're listening to this, you probably have ADHD. If you're not, thanks for listening for whoever you know that has ADHD, or you might be ADHD adjacent, so it's probably also relevant. But we come by our executive dysfunction, honestly. And I don't even like the word dysfunction, right? Our brain functions differently. And so there are ways that we can work with the way our brains work to get ourselves to do things, like bring our awesome ideas to the table and put them into action. And, we shouldn't have to nearly kill ourselves doing it so that we're pushing, pushing, pushing and crashing. There are ways to do this. But when I lean in and listen to what ADHD women are saying, especially entrepreneurs, it's not that they don't know how. It's not that they don't know like strategies or tools. I mean, yeah, there's some room for some improvement there, talking about the interest-based nervous system and how to work with it versus trying to do like neurotypical recommended strategies. But a lot of times it's not for lack of knowledge. It's for not being able to get themselves to do it. And some of that is using the skills they know would help. And some of it, often the bigger piece of it, is being able to believe in themselves, trusting themselves, overcoming fear. And so we're going to unpack some of what's behind this in a little bit, but I want to talk about other ways that you might notice this. So you might catch yourself listening to everyone on the outside about what you should do with your business instead of like sitting quietly and listening to your inner wisdom. And you might be like, Jen, I am never quiet. Like my brain is constantly going. And I want to tell you that can that can be the case for sure. And I also have experienced with yoga, meditation, mindfulness, other tools that we can actually, I don't know that I want to say completely quiet the brain because our brains think that's what they do, but we can at least have that noise go to the background and turn down the dial enough that we can actually sit and hear our inner wisdom. But we have to know how to do it. And again, going back to what I was just saying, is we have to believe we're worth that investment of our time, energy, and whatever resources to be able to do those things. Another thing I see is avoiding conflict or doing things just to keep the peace. And that might work for you and your family or worked for you to some degree, right? Like when you do that, oftentimes you end up getting resentful and there ends up being, usually a blow up at some point because you're like, oh my God, I've had it, right? Like our efforts to keep the peace often are short term because of our own lack of internal peace when we do that. But when we do that with our business, we do things just to keep the peace, it ends up really negatively impacting our business. And like I said, we come by this honestly. We were so often corrected and criticized, and many of us just tried to make ourselves small and out of the way and like follow the rules and try and keep it together as much as we could. Some of us were able to do that, some not, just depending on what was going on in your life, what your family system looked like, what your inner and outer resources were, et cetera. But a lot of times we learn to try and not be too much because we were told we were too much. And so, as part of that, we tended to do everything we could to keep the peace instead of speaking up and doing what we needed to do for ourselves and for our business, right? Another way we do this, another way we stay small is by like not investing in the tools we need to actually help ourselves do things, right? Like I see people will duct tape, and I've done this, like, right? Like we all do this, right? Like they duct tape together different freebies or low cost options instead of really going for like the big thing that will actually help them work through some of this stuff, right? I certainly did this. I went with a less expensive option for my first course to teach me how to do online courses. And I mean, it wasn't inexpensive, but it was less expensive. And she was great. Like it was great. I learned so much. I don't regret having done it. But by doing that, then I ended up later having to spend more and more money and time because I hadn't done the inner work that I needed to do and really invested in something that could help me. So let's unpack this because there are a lot of things contributing to these different I don't know that I want to use the word symptoms. I'm trying to get away from pathology. But these are different signs that you're keeping yourself small. And so let's talk about what might be beneath that a little more. So one of the things I said is we come by this honestly. So in no way am I like, you just need to get your shit together. Because that is like a repeat of everything we've been told our entire lives. It's not about getting our shit together. It's actually about noticing the parts of us that feel a need to get our shit together, honoring that, thanking them, and being like, oh my gosh, you got me to this point in my life, right? Like I have get your shit together parts. And I don't know that I could have graduated from college and gotten my master's degree had I not had some get your shit together parts. And even maybe to some degree, some staying small parts because they kept me from getting in big trouble when I was younger so that I was able to make it to adulthood. I mean, I don't know. These things may have served us at some time. And so we come by it honestly. It's just that the way these parts of us are going about helping us now is no longer effective, especially if we're in business for ourselves or planning to start a business or have maybe done the first steps, but just can't get ourselves to follow through and do what we need to do to really put ourselves out there and get clients and start the work that we know we can do to help others. So, another thing that I see is a high propensity for people pleasing. And don't get me wrong, I think like most women, at least in my generation and older, like for sure the baby boomers are like born people pleasers. I mean, maybe not born, but they were definitely trained to be people pleasers, right? They were trained to serve and all the older generations. But I got to tell you, my Gen X people, like clients, friends, relatives, Yeah, most of us people pleasers, right? And I would even say some of the younger folks, I sound like an old lady when I say that, but a lot of the millennials still doing the people pleasing. I'm finding Gen Z does it a lot less. So I'm like, ooh, that's awesome. Although they kind of do it in sneaky ways, right? Like they'll try and make all these like cool, sexy photos on Instagram, with their like lips pursed, which you couldn't see because I'm not on the I'm on audio unless they happen to pull my VA happens to pull that clip. But right, but not that I could make that kind of a face anyway, but my point is, right, is we all have our own way of people pleasing. And a lot of times beneath that is avoiding conflict, is getting people to like us, avoiding being in trouble, avoiding people being mad at us. And again, like I said, that desire we come by honestly, because I don't know about you, but I have had enough of people criticizing me and telling me what to do. Like I'm so over it at 49, which I can only say for like another 2 weeks. But at 49, I'm like over it. I'm not interested in people criticizing me anymore. Or, I'm okay in constructive feedback, but like just the judgy comments, right? Which, we do have to deal with haters and stuff, but to me that's different. And I can even touch on that in a moment. But I get why we don't want people criticizing us and correcting us and acting like we don't know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. It's just a lot of times we struggle to get ourselves to do it. And one of the big reasons we struggle to do it is we think we're bad because of our ADHD. We think we can't because we've been told that we're doing it wrong. But what if we weren't doing it wrong this whole time? What if we were doing it the ADHD way? And it's just all those neurotypical grown-ups in our life said we were doing it wrong. Maybe even our peers, right? A little bit about haters. I know that can feel like criticism a lot of times. And this is hard, right? Like there's still going to be the sting because most of us tend to be highly sensitive. And when there's a hater, a lot of times, like some of it is just people like just doing stupid shit and like commenting negative. But a lot of times that can be an indicator that like for where we can take our content. Not that we like listen to the outside and haters to guide us, but if someone makes like a comment that's like pokes a hole in something we're saying, that's something worth investigating, right? So we can kind of flip the script on some of that to not take it as criticism. But back to our people pleasing, as long as we're people pleasing, our business is going to really struggle because you can't be a people pleaser and do really well in business. It's just not going to happen. You have to go for it. You have to be the owner or digital CEO or regular CEO of your business, right? And that may sound like, oh my gosh, CEO. And if you're like done with the corporate stuff, you might be like, gross. But I'm not talking about the C suite big corporation CEO. I'm talking about the CEO of your business, right? That you get to create consciously and with intention and with heart and passion for helping people. So maybe redefining what that chief executive officer term even means. Okay. So we talked about people pleasing and we talked about avoiding conflict. And one thing I want to talk about that's another layer behind it, is that a lot of ADHD women don't trust themselves. I mean, and to be fair, why would you? Because most of us were told that we're doing it wrong. But if we've got to find a way to move past not trusting ourselves. And here's what I mean, right? We don't trust ourselves that if conflict ensued, we could handle it. We don't trust ourselves that if we really put out there and played big, that we could handle whatever happened. We don't trust that we could handle it if it didn't go well when we played big and that we could be like, oh, yeah, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to try something different, right? We don't trust that we could handle that. We have parts of us that are afraid we would fall apart. And that's the other big thing that I wanted to mention today is fear. There are so many ways that fear trips us up. And a lot of it comes down to not trusting ourselves. And when I say not trusting ourselves, what I actually mean, and this is going to get kind of, you know, meta here for a moment, but what I mean is we have parts of us who are kind of running the show and doing all the stuff, which is amazing, right? Like we have, and if you're like, what the heck are you talking about parts, right? We all have parts of ourselves. And if you're like, what? I don't, like I don't have multiple personalities. That's not what I'm talking about. Although certainly there are people who have that. But what I mean is like you might have a part of you that Oh yeah, like right now I'm in a phase of eating bread with Parmesan Reggiano, and as someone who is like mostly vegan and find that bread tends to bloat me even if I get the like the good stuff that's from out of our country, like France, because they don't use like all the GMOs and stuff. Right now I'm on a bread kick, right? And so like I'm loving it, by the way. I'm like, awesome. So there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, it tastes so good just to eat this bread with Parmesan Reggiano and some olives and a little bit of olive oil with some garlic salt mix in there. Oh, so good. And there's a part of me that's like, okay, you're kind of bloaty and your pants are tight because you're bloaty. And so maybe we can cut back on that. Right. And it's a both and, right? There's those different parts of us. And so it's not that we're like, having all these different personalities that are separate. It's just that we have different, you can call it feelings if you like to, about different things. And what I will say is when our parts are running the show, like the parts of us who hold fear about what would happen if we went big, they don't know our inner wise woman. They don't know our highest self. They don't know that deep inside, we are this powerful being who is always curious and compassionate and clear and so much more, right? They don't see our light. And so they feel that they have to protect us because they don't think we can handle it. And maybe they're right for a little while until we can learn to access that inner self. And that's really what doing this deeper work is about. So I'm super excited because all of these challenges that we talked today about are pieces of the big picture of what we're going to talk about in my 3-day live event that's coming up so soon on December 28th. We're starting. And so I'm really excited to do this work with you and to start to unpack what's beneath this and tell you what to do to work with it. Because it's fine if you're like, okay, yeah, okay, I've got all this fear. Yep, I'm a people pleaser. And I'm just going to muscle my way through stopping it. And I don't mean to be snarky, but my question is how's that working for you? Right? I get it. I was taught when I first went to therapy before I even knew what a therapist was, right? Like my roots are, I was an actuary, well, technically actuarial analyst because I only passed 4 exams and then left to become a social worker. So there's that. But when I started therapy before I knew what therapy was, a lot of the work that was done was mindset stuff and cognitive behavioral therapy, working with your thoughts. And that was fine. But essentially, what it did is it created parts of me that could shift my thoughts about it, but not shift my heart or anything deep inside me about it. And so now what I notice is I can kind of muscle my way through a lot of things. But when the shit hits the fan and the going gets tough, it's even harder to do that because all that stuff is, like hard to access. You might feel more dysregulated. And, until we do that deeper work, which I've since done, that's how I know it works. Now I have better access to that self energy, that inner wise woman, if you will. And I'm able to be like, okay, this wasn't my first choice of how this would happen. And we can work through the feelings and do all that stuff. And what can we do now? Right. So, this is some of the work we're going to get into over my 3-day live this week. So, I hope you'll be there. The link to register is in the comments for the podcast. I'm just pumped. We're going to unpack all this stuff. And like, it's 3 days. So it's not just fluff. Like, I'm excited to really help you get a good start on this for yourself. So make sure you register and show up. And if you're not already following this podcast, please share. Please follow. Also share. Right. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll see you on the live. Take care.